আচ্ছা স্যার, বলছি যে এই ওয়েব ক্যামটা থেকে ইউটিউবে ভিডিও চলছে না। স্যার একটা জিনিস ট্রাই করে নিই, নাহলে ও আগে সেটা চলছে সেটাই। না না স্যার, আমার সবকিছু ঠিক আছে, শুধুমাত্র ক্যামেরাটা চেঞ্জ করে দিলেই হয়ে যাবে, বাকি সব সেটা সেমই আছে। হয়ে গেছে স্যার, এবার দেখুন স্যার। একটু ইউটিউব খুলতে। হ্যাঁ, হ্যাঁ। চলে এসছে স্যার। তো স্যার, ইয়ে তো চলে এসছে। আমি এখন যে সেট আপটা করেছি সেটা হচ্ছে স্যার, যে আপনি যেটা জুমে দেখতে পাচ্ছেন ওইটা ইউটিউবে দেখা যাচ্ছে সেম। একদম স্যার। স্যার, সায়নদা, স্যার, স্যারকে কিছু বলতে বলো না, স্যারকে কিছু বলতে বলো।
Welcome back to our new session.
ঠিক। হ্যাঁ স্যার, এটাই দেখা যাচ্ছে, এটাই শোনা যাচ্ছে।
I would like to introduce the dignitaries and
হ্যাঁ স্যার।
participants. So please take your seats, and we are going to start our next session. It has started the very auspicious third Ashok Rudra Memorial Lecture. We are happy to inform you that We are honored to have renowned academician, researcher, and policymaker, Professor Kaushik Basu, Karl Marx Chair Professor at Cornell University, USA. It's my privilege to invite the honorable dignitaries, Professor Kaushik Basu, Professor Veeramani, Professor Soumya Chakraborty, and Professor Apurva Kumar Chattopadhyay take their seat on the dais. Thank you, sir. Now, I would like to request Professor Apurva Kumar Chattopadhyay, coordinator of the program of the Ashok Rudra Memorial Lecture organized by the Department of Economics and Politics, Visva-Bharati, to felicitate Professor Kaushik Basu. I would request the team to help Professor Chattopadhyay. Kumar Chattopadhyay for formal briefing about the Ashok Rudra Memorial Lecture. Respected Professor Kaushik Basu, Professor C. Veeramani, distinguished guests, conference participants, my esteemed colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, a very warm good morning to one and all again. I feel privileged to make some introductory remarks about Ashok Rudra Memorial Lecture. Ashok Rudra was a renowned economist as well as quote unquote public intellectual. From the mid 1950s, he conducted many pioneering studies of India's economy and society. Rudra's professional writings, based on painstaking research and strong value commitment, often challenged established theories and conventional wisdom. He was equally creative and fearless in his intervention in public debates. Rudra also wrote prolifically on literary and cultural subjects and became an eminent Bengali writer. Few Indian economists achieved this remarkable grade of technique, scholarship, and creativity. Ashok Rudra worked with many academic institutions in India. He served the government of Kerala as Director, Bureau of Economic Studies from 1958 to 1960, and after that joined the ISI Delhi. He was a professor of economics at Bombay University, Delhi University, and Visva-Bharati University. He worked as senior fellow of the ICSSR from 1974 to 1977 and as a professor of ISI, Calcutta in 1978-79. In 1979, he rejoined Visva-Bharati as a professor of economics and retired in 1990. Professor Rudra served our department for a considerable period in two stints. we thought that in recognition of his contribution both to the department and his outstanding and diverse contribution to the discipline in particular and the intellectual world in general, it would be a fitting honor to institute an annual lecture in his memory. The first lecture was delivered by Professor Prof on 13th January 2019 at Bangladesh Bhavan Auditorium. He spoke on Nunatama Arthik Suraksha Adhikar, or universal basic income as part of the right to minimum economic security, and Professor Amartya Sen was the chief guest. Professor Prabhat Patnaik delivered the second lecture on employment and poverty under neoliberal capitalism on 10th April 2024. We are grateful that we have an intellectual of Professor Kaushik Basu's stature to deliver the third lecture of the series today. Kaushik Basu is Professor of Economics and Karl Marx Professor of International Studies at Cornell University. From 2012 to 2016, he was Chief Economist of the World Bank, and from 2009 to 2012, he served as Chief Economic Advisor to the Government of India. He was President of the International Economic Association from 2017 to 2021. He is currently the A.N.R. Kamath Visiting Chair Professor at IIT Bombay. Educated at St. Stephen's College, Delhi, and the London School of Economics, Professor Basu has published widely in development economics, game theory, and moral philosophy. His books include Analytical Development Economics, The Republic of Beliefs, A New Approach to Law and Economics, and Policymakers Journal from New Delhi to Washington, D.C. In 2021, he was awarded the Humboldt Research Prize. He was awarded the Padma Bhusan, which is the third highest civilian award in the Republic of India, in 2008. Professor C. Veeramani will chair this session. Professor Veeramani is a PhD in economics from CBS, Jawaharlal Nehru University, and now the professor and director, Center for Development Studies, Thiruvananthapuram. He was a professor at IGIDR. He has also taught at IIT Mumbai and was a fellow of Indian Council of Research on International Economic Relations, New Delhi. His area of specialization includes international trade, industrial economics, foreign investment, labor market. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Chattopadhyay. Now I would request Professor Soumya Chakraborty, Head of the Department of Economics and Politics, Visva-Bharati, to welcome Professor Kaushik Basu and also the delegates in this third Ashok Rudra Memorial Lecture.
Just like a bad teacher, I'm repeating and this welcoming because I have already welcomed our delegates for the international conference, but it's definitely another welcome that is needed for many of the guests who have come here now, and especially Professor Kaushik Basu, who has been kind enough to come to the department, and this is the second time he's coming. He has this is after 18 years most probably. He will be delivering this grand lecture, and I welcome Professor Kaushik Basu formally to the department for this Ashok Rudra Memorial Lecture. Actually, Professor Ashok Rudra, this memorial lecture in the department, this is the third lecture. But earlier in university, there were two other lectures previously, 90s maybe, but this was discontinued. And it's good that Professor Apurva Chattopadhyay, he took the opportunity, initiative, and we could initiate this lecture. And in the department, this is the third memorial lecture, Ashok Rudra Memorial Lecture. And I welcome all of you once again. because many of you have come for this lecture only. So I would request you to be here till the full lecture is over, because we are a bit late. I'm sorry for that. And definitely we'll have lots of questions, lots of discussions. So with this, I should.
Sadhu, sadhu.
Thank you, Professor Chakraborty. Now, this is the time to hand over the charge of the session to Professor C. Veeramani, Director, Center for Development Studies, Trivandrum. So, he will be chairing this session. So, sir, now the session is yours. Of course, one point to be noted that the lecture will be followed by the question answer. Thank you.
Good morning again. It's really an honor and privilege to welcome all of you to the third Ashok Rudra Memorial Lecture. This series honors the legacy of Professor Ashok Rudra, a remarkable economist whose work on agrarian relations and inequalities are deeply relevant today. The topic of today's lecture, Inequality in India and World, is the one that echoes Professor Rudra's keen interest, his lifelong concerns on inequality related issues. To explore this subject, we have Professor Kaushik Basu. We are fortunate to have such an eminent person with us to deliver this lecture. Professor Basu, of course, doesn't need an introduction. He's a distinguished economist of our times and almost thinkers of our time. And his pioneering work in game theory, developing the economics, and his leadership roles both at the World Bank and Government of India combined sharp analysis with a strong sense of humanity. We can't have a better person and a better topic for this lecture. So it's my honor to invite Professor Kaushik Basu to deliver the third Swadhyaya.
Thank you very much. Professor Purgokuman Chakraborty, Professor Veeramani, Professor Shoma Chakraborty, faculty and students in the audience. It's an absolute pleasure for me to be back. Lots of old connections are coming back. As Shoma just reminded me, I didn't remember it was 18 years. I knew it's something between 16 and 20. And I was here 18 years ago. With Veeramani, we've been corresponding on the K. Raj module. So it's just wonderful. And with Purgokuman, I've been back and forth about this. So it's, for me, it's really a pleasure. And to come back to Shantiniketan, I don't need any excuse. So thank you very much for that invitation. Ashok Rudra, very curiously, actually just talking to some students, I recall suddenly my first meeting with Ashok Rudra. Since after my school, I left Kolkata, I had not met him as, yeah. Worst scenario I can do without it. Yeah, let it remain on this. My first meeting with Ashok Rudra was very unusual. Knew of him as a great intellectual in my early days, a few years, 2-3 years after finishing my PhD. I was in Belgium when a Belgian economist, Jean-Philippe Plateau, a young man, those days a young man, Jean-Philippe phoned me, said that, do you want to come down? It's somewhere south of Brussels, where have you heard of this Bengali intellectual, Ashok Rudra? I said, I've heard of him a lot. He said, Ashok Rudra is coming to my house. Would you like to come? So my wife and I went down and met Ashok Rudra in Jean-Philippe's house. That was my first meeting. And no surprises that his just staggering scholarship, his phenomenal mind was all on display over there. And then over the years, as an economist, I've followed his works very closely, his writings on agriculture, on credit, even his literary work, some which are literary interface between literary work and academic work, like his writings on Ushanto Chandra Mohananupis. So that's all been a part and parcel of my learning. I should also tell you, giving the Ashok Rudra lecture, bringing back so many memories, it's so typical of intellectual activity in this part of India. I remember a debate, which I don't know how many of you will remember. Ashok Rudra and Ashok Mitra got into a rather cantankerous exchange about whether Simone de Beauvoir was greater or Jean-Paul Sartre was greater. And they were getting very angry with each other. I now forget who took the side of Sartre and who of de Beauvoir, but they took different sides and they put in a lot of huge amounts of scholarship about who was greater. That's the quintessential atmosphere of the time. So thank you very much for the opportunity. My topic today is inequality, but I want to situate it in a larger domain. Inequality has been a challenge that has been with us for quite some time. It is becoming larger over every 5 years. Whether it's becoming larger every 2 years, I don't know. There are people like Branko Milanovic and others, Thomas Piketty, I will use some of his numbers, track these. But what the line that I want to take is inequality is unacceptably high today. My own view is that if we manage to improve the situation, create a more equitable world, looking back at today, people will be shocked that we tolerated this level of inequality in society. The way we get shocked when we think of the earlier times of slavery. How did human beings tolerate slavery? Forms of untouchability and caste. We feel shocked that people like us, with people with moral values, how did they tolerate? I feel there will come a time when looking back at today's inequality, we view that. So what I want to do is situate the problem, and tackling inequality requires determination, awareness that this is a problem that needs to be tackled, but there is no ham-handed way of saying, let us bring an end to it. You want to solve the problem without crashing the total economy. That is an intricate process. You need the determination to be upset about the level of inequality, and then the design, the articulation of the specificities of the plan as to how you can take it on. Because we have to remember, historically, there have been people upset by inequality have made major moves. Russia in 1917, when the Russian Revolution happens, the concern to me is a right concern. Inequality was staggering in Russia. Working classes were suffering. And so you can understand the anger that led to the Russian Revolution, that we want to flatten out and create greater equality. However, you have to remember that barely 30, 40 years later, Russia had become one of the worst forms of crony capitalist country. Political leaders with a few businesses capturing the nation fully. It began with the right intentions, but the design of how you get to that path was not worked out. And with Karl Marx, I have the view that a lot of Karl Marx's ambitions, what he wanted for the world, I would share. That is the kind of world you want. It's almost there's a spiritual element to it, that people work according to their ability and get according to their needs. It's an ideal world. But I don't think Marx got the blueprint right of how you get there. So there were problems in his positive part of his economics, which caused the problems. And in this kind of a public lecture, I can't get into full details, but I want to give you a little glimpse of the problem. Whenever I'm not showing, I'm talking without the use of point, I leave it nowadays on a picture. Because if you have graph or data on the screen, people begin to read that instead of listening to me. So I usually leave an abstract picture. That's why these two pictures is actually, one is from Bombay IIT, some people will know, the other is from Purulia. from a school that I visit. So, and I will talk a little bit about peering into the future. So this gives you a little bit about how you peer into the future. With that, let me show you. Here is a little bit of data on the inequality. The first one, the top line that you can read, this is from Oxfam study, that the 8 richest people in the world have the wealth of roughly half the population of the world. You know, I'm an economist and don't want to be unrealistic about a completely equal world. You won't get that. Some inequality is needed, it creates incentives, but not this level of inequality, where a few people capture half the wealth of the world. This is Oxfam data. Just below that, a little bit of number. This is a few years before Oxfam, so Oxfam is probably more updated. When I used to be at the World Bank likes to put things in a sort of catchy way. So I worked out, it's a simple calculation, that the 3 richest people have the wealth of 3 countries put together, A, B, and C. A for Angola, B for Burkina Faso, and C for Congo. Democratic Republic of Congo is the full name, but I wanted the A, B, and C. So 3 individuals, 3 countries, total wealth. These are not the levels of inequality that is good for society. You know, in the end, of course, this is a normative principle and you don't have to share that. But I believe that there will come a time when people will be shocked that we did not do enough. Now, so this is the global problem. This is a problem worldwide, and India is no exception. And here is a little bit of India. This is from work by Thomas Piketty. Probably all of you have heard of Piketty, who got the best data on inequality around the world, and a couple of others who worked with Thomas Piketty on this. There was, I do know, Nitin Bharti and 2 other authors I'm forgetting who are together, but it's Piketty's inequality research unit that produced this working paper last year, 2024. This data shows you the top 1% of India, the share of the total country's wealth that the top 1% has, and it's the income. If you take the annual income and the 1%, the share of the income that goes to that is what it's showing. And you can see India's inequality rising. The rise starts actually from early 1990s, and now it has reached a level, the top 1%, which is like colonial times, 1930s, pre-independence. After independence, we haven't had this level of inequality as we have today. So with this in the background, I want to enter into a little bit of analysis. Actually, I'll go to the next one and leave it at this. The world, as all of us are aware from reading newspapers, social media, it's a very difficult phase for the world. The world is in turmoil, people are upset. What do you do about inequality, unemployment, etc.? A lot of the immediate reaction, and this is natural if you're reading newspapers, you look at the war going on in the Middle East, devastating war. I mean, there are large segments of the population just being flattened out. There's the Ukraine war going on. It's a very troubled world. And a few years ago, there was the COVID-19 pandemic. But these were the triggers. The problem was building up. The problem was building up, I think, and in many ways, a good reason. When technological advance takes place, yes, the world is becoming more productive. You've got new technology. But that can give rise to problems. And I think the growing inequality, the disparity, especially between the capitalist class, the profit-making class, and the working class becoming huge, has something to do with technology. Over the last 40 or 50 years, the arrival of digital technology is causing a grave global problem. You can see one of them in the United States, which is spilling over into a political problem. One thing which a lot of writing in the press is in America, with the arrival of this new technology, one particular problem is digital technology in particular is a new kind of arrival in the technology space. In the olden days, in a rich country, if you wanted to employ people who would charge a lower salary and wage from a developing country, emerging economy, you'd have to bring them over, keep them in your country, and they will work. The digital age changed that. For a whole class of work, it is possible. Create digital links. Your workers could be sitting in Bangalore or Kolkata or Manila and working for corporations in America or Germany or anywhere in Europe for customers who may be in Japan, Australia, anywhere. This is the digital world. This in the United States, I think a lot of the political dissent has to do with the working class in the United States is rightly very troubled by this. They are certainly not finding employment. The work is being shipped over elsewhere by the use of digital connection. But, and I'm giving this early example, I'll go into some of this. This is the kind of logical mistake that if you make in policy, you won't help the problem, you'll make it worse. A lot of very conventional thinkers in the United States, especially the very conservative thinkers in the United States, and even young protesters will say that we should just stop using outsourced labor. Close these digital links. Let's get our own workers. It will cost more, but so what? Our workers will get jobs. And at one level, if you are a part of the nation, that seems right. The government's first responsibility is to your workers. And indeed, there are conservative parties in the United States pushing. Let's close down outsourcing, goods coming in from outside, let's raise tariffs and law. But think a little bit, put a little bit of logic into this. If you stop outsourcing, there is this cheap labor available in India, in the Philippines, in South Africa, all over the world. Emerging economies has much cheaper labor than you will get in America or in Europe. If you stop using this cheap labor, which is today available by digital links, if the United States stops using it, another country will use it. They will be more productive because they are using cheaper labor. They'll be able to raise lower prices of the final product because their cost has gone down. They will outcompete the United States on the product part because they are producing the final good using a lower cost resource which the United States is not using. So countries, rich countries that try to solve their problem by raising walls and saying we will not access this labor, for a few days if they look good, but in the long run they are going to be outcompeted in the product market and their growth story will begin to tumble. I fear this, so there will be two reactions on this. Some countries will learn a lesson very quickly and say, no, we can't have this door closed, we will have to do something else. Or those countries will go down, those rich countries will begin to go down and new ones will come. One more footnote point I want to turn over here was remembering that very often the conservative political wings make it out to be a labor versus labor problem. US labor versus Indian labor. America should prefer American labor. But this is not just a labor versus labor problem. Every time a factory or a corporation sends work out to India or the Philippines or to Vietnam, labor cost goes down. Yes, American labor suffers, but one thing goes up in America, profit goes up. So this is also a labor versus profit tension, which very little attention is drawn. In principle, it is possible for America's higher profit to be used to compensate, say, American labor that is being outcompeted. So these are the kinds of policies you can get into. But I'm spending too much time by preamble. I want to show you a little bit of data over here. This is the problem of global advanced economies, but even middle-income countries. India is formally, by the World Bank, classified as a lower middle-income country. But for upper middle-income countries, which is just a little bit higher than India, and above upper middle-income countries and rich countries, this is a very representative data. I've collected over here graphs for a few rich countries. What this shows is, let me tell you, I don't know how well you can read it, but let me just explain to you. If you take the national income, the share that goes to workers, this data is from 1975 or 76 to 1916, 17. I wanted to stop before the COVID comes. If you take that period, you can see the share of the national income going to workers is coming down steadily. This is the march of technology and what that is doing to the workers. There's data over here, but you don't really have to look at the data right now. Anyway, so this is the problem that you have to handle, and the demand for labor is going down. I personally believe that for emerging economies, middle-income countries like India, low-income countries like so many in sub-Saharan Africa, right now, the technology problem is not something that needs us to switch to completely different methods. Our labor is still low enough. If we do our economic policy right, we can actually create many more jobs and take care of some of the inequality problem right now by labor market policy right. 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road, maybe 20 years, our labor cost will rise. Then we will begin to face the same problem that rich countries do. Major challenges. What do you do about machines and labor? On that, I have some views, but today is not the occasion. Right now, India is at a stage where if we do our policies right, for at least 10 to 20 years, we can play this conventional economic game well and continue to have less equality, workers getting better jobs. So let me show you the worker situation. I just look at youth unemployment. This will tell you how India's situation is pretty bad. Youth unemployment, youngsters from the age of 15 to 24, the percentage that is unemployed in India, Bangladesh, and China, it's very close, roughly 15%, which is very, very high. Yes, there are trouble with Middle Eastern countries. Sri Lanka recently had huge trouble, has huge amounts of youth unemployment, but there are also countries like Vietnam, South Korea. If you don't want to look at rich countries like South Korea and Japan, though they were not rich countries even 2 decades ago, they've now become South Korea. Japan has been for a long time. Vietnam, youth unemployment is much less. And this needs policy interventions, get youth unemployment back in space. I should tell you, for those who are not economists, when you say that the percentage of people who are youth unemployed from the age 15 to 24, unemployment is defined in the following fashion. It's not that the percentage of all people of that age who are unemployed. Many of them don't want a job. They are going to college, they are studying. Unemployment is defined as those who want a job and not getting it. So having 15% of that is very, very high. And these are youngsters. There are many factors driving it. I'll give you one, just a little bit of verbal description, which is current work that I am doing with one of my PhD students, Saloni Vadea. It's an interesting subtopic, not a major topic. You know, we discovered, or discovery is the wrong word because everyone knows about it. You get it in newspaper articles and popular writing. Large number of Indians of that young age group spend years taking variety of government job tests. You're going to coaching classes, training yourselves, and you're waiting to get a job. They want a job, but they want a specific kind of job. So there are cases of people spending 5 years, 6 years, 8 years, having breakdowns, just repeatedly taking these tests, joining coaching classes to get into a government job. This is a bit like, for economists, it's a bit like the old-fashioned Lewis model. I'm sure all economists know this, Arthur Lewis model, describing unemployment in developing countries as people come from villages to urban areas. They don't have jobs. They want a job, so they keep waiting in the urban sector. This is the famous dual economy model, trying to get an urban job, and the pool of the unemployment is youngsters waiting in cities to get a job. This is a bit similar that is happening now. This is just a poster from Delhi's Mukherjee-Nagar, which is very close to where I used to live. I believe it is Mukherjee-Nagar. I hope I'm not getting that wrong. Yes, it is Mukherjee-Nagar. You recognize. Thank you very much. I was wondering where I got the picture from. I cut it out somewhere. Okay, let me, with one word now, get into what we should do about the problem. I have one little theoretical argument. 10-15 minutes is fine. Okay, I've got one theoretical argument which will take a little bit of time. I want to give you a bit of a glimpse of how you take on these problems. Let me do it in a different way. Yeah. I'll show you first of all. Don't begin to read this graph. I'll explain the graph to you in one moment. This pair of matrix. What I wanted to explain to you is, we feel restless about inequality. I feel very restless because I just stupidly don't know what is happening. But for a single country to cure the full problem in today's world is not possible. I feel it's possible to do much more than we are doing in India, as I just said. Top to the average, inequality is going sky high. That can be corrected, but more correction will cause a globalization problem. I want you to be aware of this. So I hope it will happen that we will reach a stage in the world where different countries can come together on a global platform and say, let us have some collective global regulations to have greater equality in the world. At one level, it may look hopeless. Can United States, Vietnam, India, China get together in a forum and say, let's have some common rules for greater equality? At one level, it looks hopeless, but the world has made gains where at one stage it would have looked hopeless. Within the United States, when slavery was rampant, the few people who were beginning to say that this is a shameful system and we will correct it, that time the feeling was so many big moneyed people in America have a vested interest in the system of slavery that we will never be able to do away with. But the long run championing that this is a shameful thing, needs correction, did get corrected. You think of international labor laws, international exploitation of labor, still rampant. Labor gets exploited very badly, but once upon a time it was dreadful because countries played against each other. You would tell another country, bring your corporation to my country, I will give you very cheap labor, I will keep the wages low, you bring your investment into my country. Another country would do the same and labor wages would get pushed up. It still happens, but nevertheless, International Labour Organization, ILO, now has a few global rules. These are called ILO conventions to prevent the worst forms of exploitation. So I feel it is possible to do something, and this little bit of game theory gives you a sense of the problem of the need for global coordination. Now, I've cooked up these numbers. The vertical line is a country A that can have 3 levels of taxation: negligible tax, low tax, moderate tax. And country B can have negligible, low, and moderate. Now, this bit of theoretical model, keep in your head. What I've chosen these numbers and these words: negligible, low, moderate. Just to me, moderate is the taxation that we would want. Decent tax, the better off are paying for the poorer ones. Low is low and negligible is completely wrong. There are lots of social problems you do need. But I'll show you what will happen if it's a global game. So if you lower your tax when another country has higher tax, you will get flight of capital. Today we live in a globalized world. Capital will go into the country with a lower tax. So if you start with 2 countries going for a moderate tax, the benefit to each country is 3-3. Think of this as, I don't know, $3 million and $3 million. The country is getting with low tax at the country's welfare. If both are charging a moderate high tax, if you, country A, make your tax lower, you will attract capital and your welfare will go up from 3 to 4. So that 3-3 will not survive. Those who have some game theory will know 3-3 is not a Nash equilibrium. It will not survive. Someone will deviate to L and you will move to 4-1 or 1-4. Will L and survive? If both of you are charging a low tax, if you're doing that, then one country, my country, country A, can make the tax even lower, negligible, and attract more capital. I was earning 2, my country now earns 3. 2-2 will not survive. If this global game goes on, there's only one equilibrium that will survive: 1-1, which is NN. Both of you are charging negligible tax. You've competed with each other. Taxes are virtually gone. And actually, a little bit of this game happens all the time. You use your cheap labor, lower taxes, etc. to attract capital. This is the reason why you need global contracts and global understanding getting into the problem. Big topic, I will not go into that. Let me use the last bit to give you a bit of a theoretical argument, but with just one picture. I will try to convey this to you. A slightly different thing. You know, two different objectives which are related. One is the end of poverty. Other is control of inequality. The World Bank, I don't know how familiar you are, World Bank for a long time, from the time of Wolfenson, when Mohamed Hussein was a prominent advisor to the World Bank adopted a motto saying that a world without poverty. So they want to bring down poverty. Number of people living below the poverty line. The World Bank's aim was that you make that go to zero, you bring that down. When I joined the World Bank as chief economist in 2012, with the World Bank president that time, I said, you know, poverty is the first target. You don't want people below the poverty line. But excessive inequality also is very, very damaging. And it not only damages economic welfare, but it robs people of their voice. It does damage to democracy, especially in today's world of influence control through social media. Few people can control the democratic space of ideas in a big way. We need to pay attention not just to poverty removal, but also in bringing inequality down. What I want to tell you is give you a glimpse of how these problems are intricacies. Whether you're aiming to minimize inequality or eradicate poverty, you get different results and you have to be careful, work this out. This is just an imaginary idea. So start with this. Let me see if I can explain this to you. Within one country. Tax rate can be 0 to 1. 1 means you're at 100% tax. Anything will be taken. It's just the space. 0 to 1 is the total taxation. And the income in this society, there are two kinds of people. Those who are jobless, they don't get jobs, and those who are doing well, got jobs, they are running businesses, etc. Just two classes. When tax is 0, look at the 0, the capital Y, the top end, that's the income of the people who are working and have run corporations, etc. And the lowercase y, that A, lowercase a, that's the income of people who, that's a very low income of people who don't have jobs. So people with jobs, jobless. Jobs and profits, they're running. If you bring in a tax, I'm bringing in a very simple taxation system. The taxation system is, we just take from the rich, give it to the poor. If you raise the tax, the income of the rich will begin to go down, the income of the poor will begin to rise. But here's what you have to keep in mind in addition. As you are raising the tax, the rich will work a little bit less, their incentive is going down. So, if you remove a larger amount as tax, but their income has gone down, after a point of time, the total amount of money being raised from them could fall. Is this clear? So, you're taking a larger share of that income, their income taxation. But that is dampening their work, so their total work is going down, so that your net collection goes down. So what you'll be transferring to the poor will begin to fall. That's why there is this humped curve of poor people's income. That they are just receiving the transfers, but the transfers will begin to fall, so it goes up and comes down. And the rich people's income, of course, comes down as you are raising tax. When you make tax 1 or 100%, their income goes to 0. And in fact, their income goes to 0, so there's nothing to collect. Poor people's income goes to 0. It's a disastrous point. We're not looking at it. If your obsession is with equality, I want to stress it's important, but if you make an obsession of it, total equality, the rich and the poor should have the same. You can see what will happen. You will stop at a tax rate T hat. At T hat, the rich and the poor have the same income. Complete equality in society, but both of them are worse off than what they could have been if the tax was a little bit less. If the tax was T star, both of them, both the poor and the rich, would be better off. So you can't be obsessive about equality. that make it completely flat world, that some people get into that, because you will damage both. Those who were earlier better off, those who are worse off, both will be worse off. If your aim is to help the bottom segment, first you will stop at T-star. So depending on the setup that you are considering, you will have to think in terms of different kinds of policies, different kinds of interventions to take care of this problem. One particular thing that I've been writing about a lot is this is more a problem for rich countries, but it will come to India. It is beginning to come to India, and I will tell you once, and it will take me just 5 or 6 minutes more, and then I do want to take some of your questions. You know, a very new kind of creature in today's economy is the platform, whereby if you want to call, you remember in the olden days, if you need a taxi, you go around in the street, go to the taxi stand, look around for it. Taxis cruising around looking for customers, finds you. You find the taxi, you take the ride. Now you've got Ola, you've got Uber, you've got Lyft, these are platforms. Buying commodities, in the olden days, you'd go to one shop, another shop, etc. Now you get onto Amazon, look at the prices, and you do buying and selling. This has changed economics in a way that most people don't realize how dramatically. In the US, there are many people who say that we need to have stronger antitrust law, but this is such a changed world that traditional antitrust law is not going to work against this. And let me just explain this to you. The standard model of economics, which goes back to 1776 and has come to us, starts with Adam Smith, is where markets happen in the following fashion. There are some people who are the buyers. I want a taxi ride, he wants a taxi ride, she wants a taxi ride, we are looking around. And some people are sellers. They are riding taxis and looking for customers. There are buyers and the sellers, and trade takes place when they find each other. Who brings them together, the buyer and the seller? You will all know in Adam Smith, that bit is left a blank. The invisible hand of the market brings hundreds and thousands of buyers together with hundreds and thousands of sellers. Quite how the invisible hand works is left a blank. Much later, 98 years later, when Leon Walras is writing, Walras faces a similar problem. There are sellers and buyers. Who brings them together? He calls it the imaginary auctioneer, right? As I was coming in, there were people here who work on general equilibrium. In general equilibrium, there is an imaginary auction. So that part is left a blur. Think of today's world. The invisible hand is no longer invisible. It's a company called Ola or Uber that actually brings the buyers and the sellers together. It's Amazon that brings buyers and sellers together. How do you regulate them is a big challenge. You can't use traditional antitrust law and say that break it up into 500 platforms, or then the whole advantage is lost. You'll be sitting and searching on all those platforms for your right. The advantage of a platform is on one space of being able to search this. So you have to think of very different policies. My own view is, I will get into the detail, that for some of the biggest platforms, we need to have dispersed shareholding laws, that a part of the large part of the shares will be held by a large segment of the population, so that profit can be large, but the large profit will not go into just a few pockets, but it will be dispersed shareholding. In general, I've been writing a lot that the world we are moving towards is the kind of world that people like Marty Weitzman and others had once envisaged and written about, and there are people who are currently writing some form of profit sharing is needed as labor begins to diminish and virtually vanish. We will have to work towards that. Looking ahead short term, just a few words on India, and I want to stop. We are entering a different world. I am worried. India's GDP is growing, but there are lots of cracks within that. Inequality, as I just showed, is going very, very high, like in colonial times. And there are problems beginning to happen. We have to attend to that. India has lots of strengths. India has a huge amount of intellectual prowess. We will have to attend to this. Very difficult in a lecture like this to get into the details. I'm writing, I'll take an interest, but my own hunch is the kind of world we are going into. People worry about the environmental challenge and say growth can't continue. The global growth, as you know, used to be, till these last 5-6 years of trouble, roughly 3% per annum is the whole world's GDP growth, roughly. Lots of people say we can't continue to grow this fast anymore because the environment won't tolerate this. one mistake people made, which economists should not make. GDP is anything that we value. GDP does not mean more houses, more cars, more aeroplanes, more luxury hotels. GDP can be going to concerts and taking in music, going and looking at art which gives us pleasure. You are willing to pay for it. GDP can be training your mind, going into philosophy, going into art and literature, better health. All this is a part of GDP, and this is nothing new. From Simon Kuznets's time, GDP is anything that we value. We are just so used to think of material things. My own hunch is the composition of GDP is going to change, and if we survive the tumultuous time we are going into, GDP will continue to grow, probably more rapidly than now, but the content of GDP is going to change. For that, the two big sectors, this is speculation, who knows? I feel health and education, education in the broader sense of the mind being trained to take in a lot of things. These will be two very, very important sectors. And India has to place greater stress on both these sectors. And India has the potential. We can be a major player in the health sector, developing, providing better healthcare, extending life expectancy. It's possible. We've seen, go back 30 years, Bangladesh, much lower life expectancy, but through a set of policies, now has higher life expectancy than India. It's going through a very difficult phase now, but some 10, 12 years ago, maybe a bit more, it overtook in terms of life expectancy. So it's possible to pay special attention to the health sector, education, where people come from all over. As the expense goes up for education around the world in rich countries, people can come and go, and that becomes a source of also soft power for the country. You know, we keep talking about the visible power. When you look at a strong country, we look at the visible power, which is usually the strong power, the hard power. When you look at America, people look at its military strength. That has played a role, but people forget. I think the real reason why the United States rose as an economy was its soft power. The emphasis on education, higher education was phenomenal. 1930s or so, US began to give stress, and these became the center of people coming. Soft power is the true long-run driver of a nation, and India has the potential. Just that we have to turn our attention to details, not become politically blinded, and keep in mind in the end that we want to create a world which is not just 5-6 people creating a huge GDP and enjoying, but a world where it is shared, the prosperity is shared, the better health, better education spreads across the country. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Sadhu, sadhu, sir.
That is really very excellent, thought-provoking lecture, as always by Professor Basu. So we will now open the floor for some questions. And before I just open it to you, just two of my kind of clarificatory questions related to this topic. One is that when we focus on this type of inequality, that means top 1% of share of income is going to the top 1%, or when you say 8 people account for half of total income. One issue that I keep hearing about this type of approach about inequality is that whether for an ordinary people, whether that type of inequality really can matter at all. Because ordinary people take in terms of reference the group with which they identify with in terms of social class. Or, like for example, if Mukesh Ambani gets a little bit more income, I don't worry much. But if my neighbor gets more income, then that disturbs me. So that's where one question is. So to what extent this type of inequality really matters for general public, as opposed to the inequality for their reference group with which they identify themselves within in a particular social context. So that is my first question. The other question is, there is a issue of what is, even if top 1% account for a large share of GDP, The important question is, what do they do with this profit that they make? It's like, in case that profit is getting invested back in the economy, and as a result, people get employment and more economic opportunities from that. It is not necessarily a bad thing, because the alternative can be like, suppose government uses some tax policy to take that income, and then government spend that income in activities which are much less productive, which leads to less income opportunities and employment opportunities for ordinary people. So there is a trade-off. So these are the two questions that I thought I would ask you, and your insight on that, and maybe we can take more questions from the audience. Yeah, you can please feel free to ask. Yes,
One question is, Professor Basu, inequality, actually, what we have learned from you, that's an approach. Over the more than 500 years, liability is limited, which actually can call as corporatocracy. The word democracy can be replaced by corporatocracy, either people or the people of the people. Now, the whole system is by the corporate, for the corporate, of the corporate. Number one questions, and number two, you look into the matter of absolute equality of obsession. Now, can it be limited greed the same way the limited liability leads to today's corporatization of the whole economic system? Can it be the limited greed should be just like limited liability? Since if we look into the Indian economy, over the last pandemic, so much amount have been waived in the terms of loan waiver and others to the corporate world, which leads to the concentration of oil. With what we have observed, that 2 or 3 people is actually the whole wealth of economy of the world of few countries. In India also. So I have these questions before you. Please.
Yeah. So
I have one
just make it brief.
Thank you, Professor Basu, for this wonderful lecture. Am I audible?
Yes.
Audible, but I don't see where it's coming from.
So I have two very precise questions. The first one is why the foreign wages should be concerned for the corporate also, because I think that if the wage share is falling, right, and if general equilibrium is at work, then what will happen is that the demand for the goods produced by the corporate, that will also fall. So in that way, I think that the foreign wage share should be a concern for the corporate also, right? If we think in terms of general equilibrium model, in terms of foreign demand. So what is your take on this? That then how the corporates are going to suffer due to fall in the share of wages? And this is the second one in this diagram that you have shown us. When the tax rate is zero and that humps up curve. So when the tax rate is zero, the income of that poor people are a small, right? That's the starting point. And then tax rates are increasing, they are getting transferred. So their income is going up, and then after a point of time, when tax rate is too high, then their income is falling because transfers are now low. So how it can go below A, below the small A, the humps up curve? I think that the humps up curve should come down and it should get stuck at small a, because even if I consider that tax rate is too high, right? Tax revenue is zero. Then also more people has having income small a, because that's the starting point. So I think the curve is falling, but it should get stuck at small a. And moreover, I think that it looks like a Laffer curve. That tax rate and tax revenue. If it is a Laffer curve, then it should go to one, the falling portion. But if it is not a Laffer curve, if it is income of the poor people, it should get stuck at small a. That I. So
Okay.
what's your
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, yes. Yeah, we'll take another round. So.
I can answer from here. Let me just take on these questions. Lots are coming. Yeah. So first one, Professor Veeramani's question. Top 1% to rest down. Yeah. Why does that matter? In the end, the interest is there are two things. In the end, you're worried about the average population, and I will go with you that if the top end income rising has huge positive spillovers on the rest, then you go with that. One little caveat. In today's world of so much of social media control, it does also damage human voice. If someone becomes super rich, even if that's giving me a little bit of income, it's taking away my voice. That would worry me, but I agree. And that's really the thing, that the kind of thing I'm saying, that if their income is generating more, then it's worthwhile. Just that I now feel what we are doing is we are pointing to our rich people and making ordinary people celebrate that they've become so rich. You celebrate. That is just the mindset in the olden days. When a landlord would do well, the slaves would celebrate. That look, my landlord is doing well. You don't want to trick people to that. Otherwise, I agree, and I am worried about that. That you can overreact, damage the incentive and enterprise at the top, and at the bottom. Your second part was, yeah, if the GDP is creating greater wealth for the people, then it's fine. Just that I feel that you have to look at what it's doing to the people. In the World Bank, I've done something which the World Bank now produces data. For every country, you take the bottom 40%, see how they are doing. So you compare countries not by looking at the GDP where the super rich come in, but by looking at the bottom 40%. And for that, at times you have to allow the rich to become richer for that to spill over, but you're focusing on the people. To the second question, I'm afraid some of your words were cutting out. The corporatocracy, I like the word. That's pretty much what we are getting into, corporatocracy before, but limited liability, limited greed, some of these things are not within our power to reach out to. Limited greed, if I was hearing you right, you do want that. You can teach people about that. But beyond the point, there's nothing to be done. Where you have to bring in the law and say you can be as greedy as you want, but after you've done it, I'll take away a part of it and distribute it to others. That taking away to me seems to be fair, but in case I missed out a word, we can talk later and get this in. The third question, I'm jumping to this point. I'll clarify one implicit assumption in mind, and actually in future when I do this, I have to do this to explain this better. And you're right, that A, if that A is an independent income of the poorer section, then that will never go down to all the way down. After it reaches A, it should remain flat, because I've reached the minimum I can stay with. Thank you very much. I have one implicit assumption which makes my graph correct, but I should have said it. In fact, in my paper, I don't write about it. Future, I should write. My assumption was, right at the beginning, when tax is zero, income that is going to the unemployed is a spillover income from the employed people. So if their income, the employed people's income has been taken away fully and goes down to zero, the spillover income goes to zero. But if it is not a spillover income, but an exogenous income that the poorer people get, you're absolutely right. It goes through that hump, reaches A, and then remains flat. I'll have to clarify that. Later, you had another part to your question. The other part I disagree. You're saying that wage share falling should be of concern to even corporations because the demand will go down. Wage share falling does not mean demand will go down. Profit share is going up. So the kinds of things that the corporate class demands, that's going to go up. So if I'm a producer, whether I produce little coarse clothes for the poorer people or something fancy which the rich want, I don't care. I make my money. So the falling share of labor does not instinctively concern the rich, because the demand is still there, the demand is coming from other sources. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take another round.
Hello.
After that, yes. Yes, please.
Sir, we have, I am M.N. Mukherjee of Coal India. I'm asking, sir, you said, sir, unemployment means people want job, but they are not going to school. In this point, from our experience, we have seen that too much of subsidy, either from any level, state level, central government level, too much of subsidy is hampering scope of employment. That is, more than half of the population of India, that is 81 crores of people, they are getting Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana. That is our mindset is that we are going. That is we are getting subsidy. But when we are offering employment, they are not doing employment. Practically, they are not doing employment. They are choosing. They are choosing what is the job I have to do and how much he will pay me. But they are not learning whether resources are three sides. One, human resources. Second is natural resources, and natural resources is above ground and below ground resources. Whereas Ramsar Convention from 1971, they are saying you protect wetlands and give employment and wide use of wetlands throughout the world. In India, in Kolkata, East Kolkata wetland, the peculiar Ramsar site, it is the most peculiar Ramsar site. It is generating employment automatically without any investment.
Okay.
Yeah. So I am asking. My question is this subsidy-based development can generate or lose employment opportunities. This is how it can be operated.
Yes. So where is next? From that side. Yeah.
Just one query. This wage data, wage share data, can it be the case that because it's starting from 75, mid-70s, post golden age. So we know pension policy, post pension intervention. Can it be case that the global architecture, political economic architecture, like in China, Soviet Union, these were changing, and that have kind of impact on the global wage share, falling global wage share. And a related one, given the present political economic architecture, property structure, corporate, is it at all possible to have this kind of consensus, to have this tax rate, which is a moderating income inequality, and or the distribution of shares, and related to that, what could be the role of the people of civil society, going beyond intellectuals, policymakers? This much. Thank you.
Yes, we'll take two more and then close.
Professor Basu, I'm Chakraborty. Yes, the point is that and also very fantastic concept you have talked about this trade-off between opportunity and poverty. And it may be economic, but it can be covered politically also. Suppose my heroic observation, India going through this, they are just showing poverty affair, but they are fostering inequality.
other problem. And the point is that from the question now, your observation, because we were in World Bank as advisor, and you know that why people that 2000 is Millennium Economic Resolution, and the target was there. By 2025, the poverty level of the world go down. Some stability. I forgotten that one. Now this is the crucial year to review. So what I like to know your personal observation. What will be the fate of the review? Thank you, sir.
Yeah, so
Professor Basu, I have a simple clarification. Thank you for the presentation. I was wondering about what we studied here. Yeah, I was wondering about, we studied the minimum wage rate and we also learned about trade unions. So you spoke about the platform and the invisible hand, where the role of the trade unions and the workers are getting minimal in nature, and also perhaps because of globalization also. So this is on the one side, the rights of the workers are going down. On the other hand, if you look at the democratic side, then if the rights of the workers go down, then there should be a role of I don't say the left, but institutional politics. Today, Donald Trump is going to take votes in the United States. So this rightist force coming up and the labor unions going down, this is a very strange kind of phenomenon we are seeing. And along with that, I think in India, it's the same line of things that are happening. So, your take on it.
yeah, so another okay.
Just his question that now Brahmapurtham in a recent study 2022 that worldwide rise of right-wing forces out of insecurity. Now, what we have witnessed in United States, the richest person of the United States is a cabinet member of Donald Trump. And here also, we think that the richest person in India, they are also not physically present, but they are also, I think their shadow presence is there.
Okay, I think it was to respond to these questions, and we will see after that.
Yeah, first of all, M.N. Mukherjee, the definition of unemployment you wanted, let me just clarify this a little bit. The definition is clear enough. This is standard definition used for statistical purposes. People who are looking for work and not finding. I think your concern was, if I'm getting it right, is that the excessive use of subsidies, when you're getting a flat floor, makes many people pull out of work. I'm getting a minimum amount, government is going out, I won't work. You have to be careful now. That person, by the way, is not going to show up as a employee. If you're not even looking for work because you're not employed, this is a purely statistical point, you are not counted as unemployed. What you seem to be concerned about is that this is causing people to pull back from the labor market. No, here my own view is country is well off enough, and to create a floor below which people get a support so that they won't work is fair enough. This will cause wage, you'll have to give a higher wage, attract them in. So there is a balancing act involved. You have to work this out very, very carefully, and that's why I can't go into full details. I was giving you examples where first our heart goes out in one direction, then when you do the analysis carefully, you say that keep the heart in the right direction, but you have to adjust the policies to make sure that it does not backfire. So you have to take account of that. And in India, I think the big challenge also is small business and very big business. It's not just workers and the corporate class, because the corporate class in India, there are lots of small businesses who face hardship like workers without proper jobs. So the divide is increasingly becoming small businesses and the real big businesses where we have to pay our attention. The wage data, share data. Let me just see that. Oh, yeah, this I did not follow. One part of it is fine, but the second part is causing me a problem. Is the global political economy architecture you're describing as causing the decline, the graph that I had over there from 1976 onwards. It's a political economy structure. You may be right because I don't have data before that. And this trend of the decline may not have been there before that. So it's starting around then it's going on. My own hunch is, even if it's political economy, beneath that, there is an economic driver. Arrival of digital technology is what is causing suddenly, for rich countries especially, two things are happening. One is machines are replacing labor. Number two, digital connectivity is replacing your labor with labor in a faraway country. So your laborer's share of income is going down. That has huge political economy connections, but the key driver may well be the pure rise of technology, because we see some similar kinds of trends in 1750s. When the industrial revolution first comes, you will see some similar numbers over there taking place, where again the root is technology of a different kind. Dr. Chakraborty, yeah. And the poverty level going down, I'm not fully with you, but let me tell you one thing, that you're saying the review that is needed looking ahead, that it's 20 years since many of these targets were set. And if I understood you right about the decline in poverty, that's one target, though it has not been met, is going reasonably well. Extreme poor, the World Bank, you probably know, defines a person as poor if it is less than roughly 200 rupees. I'm converting from dollars into Indian currency, 200 rupees per day. If you're spending less than that, you're counted as poor, very poor. Less than 200 rupees per day is your total expenditure. By that count, all over the world, it is really going down. So when we take stock, we look into the future. On that, we've done fine. Where we have not done fine, though that was not a part of the United Nations aims, is inequality. To me, inequality is going too high. Other one, which is a challenge when we are doing badly, is climate change. And you know, climate change, it's not just carbon emissions and the big ones of what will happen 15 years down the road. Even pollution. The rise of pollution is causing life expectancy to go down. There are studies which now suggest that in India, in Delhi, life expectancy could be down by 8 years, compared to if the pollution level was kept AQI less than 50, which is the global standard that you try to aspire to. So I think if you take stock, there's been some achievement of poverty, but in terms of inequality and climate, this is where our focus should be. And the final question, am I getting the questions right? No, there were two more questions. Let me make sure I'm getting this right. The minimum wage and trade unions, rights of workers. Rights of workers now has a bit of a subtle point I have to go into. This is of great interest to me. You want workers to be better off, but at times, what we assume is going to make workers better off, again for complicated economic reasons, could backfire. Here it may strike a chord with the kind of argument. You know, in India, there's something called the Industrial Disputes Act. Now it's being replaced, not quite replaced, it's being absorbed into the labor code. The Industrial Disputes Act has a provision which at first sight looks very pro-trade union, pro-workers, but I think it has harmed us. That says that if your firm has more than 100 workers, this is now being raised to 300, but whether it's 100 or 300, it's still a cutoff. If you want to downsize your firm, have fewer workers, you have to go to the government to get permission. Industrial Disputes Act, 1947. We do know what this has done. Governments typically don't give permission. It looks very bad for the government to stand up and say you can dismiss your workers. governments feel scared to do that. So what has happened in India is firms don't make their labor force sufficiently big because they are scared if the demand drops in the future and I can't downsize, I will be stuck with it. This law, if it can be changed, at first sight it may look anti-labor. My own hunch and little bits of calculation that I've done, it's going to actually give a boost to the demand for labor by the fact that now corporates will feel more free to be able to take on more workers because they know that if the demand suddenly drops, I will be able to downsize, and I think that will benefit. And finally, the question about Prof. Gordon's remark about the rise of right-wing forces. It's a very general point and very correct. Worldwide, there is a rise of the right-wing force. World history is replete with that. We have seen it happen. Rome, Italy, parts of Italy, Roman Empire was democracy for centuries. That collapses. Right-wing forces come up. My own feeling about the right-wing forces is, for a lot of ordinary people, it's an anger, but it's an inchoate anger. They can't quite articulate what is causing them to be angry. You look at United States, it is true the working classes have suffered over the last 20, 30 years. International competition is going up because of new technology, they are suffering. The anger in the olden days would convert into a left-wing anger. It's a strange word. And there is a lot of political management of this, that this has been converted into a right-wing anger, which is actually helping the few super rich very well because it is to their advantage. So very complicated situation, complicated time for the world. But for that reasons, for us, for students, it's also the time to pause, think about your ideas. One of the questions pointed that, is there a chance with so much corporate interest that we will get over this? Again, I look at some of the hardest policies which we've undertaken in the past, anti-slavery laws, which for a long time seemed hopeless. The big businesses rely on slaves. But building up opinion, writing, championing for this ultimately did lead to that global charter, minimal agreement across countries which the United Nations goes for. International Court of Justice in the olden days looked impossible. Diverse world, can we get this? But we've also done. So we must not lose hope and push towards these.
Really a fantastic session and a lot of interesting questions. I know that many of you want to ask questions, but unfortunately, the organizer is asking me to close the session. So they are not allowing me to extend it. So I have to close it, and he wants to make some comments. Thank you so much, sir, for that really brilliant session. Lecture.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Many thanks, Professor Kaushik Basu and Professor Veeramani. Now, this is the end of this Ashok Rudra Memorial Lecture. Now, I would like to request the conference participants, conference resource persons, and organizers. Now, we have to go to the Department of Economics and Politics with the Bhavan. Okay, our next session, named parallel technical sessions will start from 2 p.m. sharp. Okay, so please cooperate with us. Already we are running late by 15 minutes. Thank you so much. So everything is in the department only, not any other place. So conference organizers, resource persons, conference participants, you are requested to go to the Department of Economics and Politics. 4 invited speakers: Professor Veeramani, Professor Lipika, Professor Ramanamurthy, and Professor Abhidhar Kumar Tiwari. So it will be held by our volunteers by arranging cards with their department and faculty members by the volunteers. Thank you.